WMFO in Medford. How you doing? Good morning. I'm Mike. All right, so I've got a couple of folks smiling across the desk from me, and yeah, one more than the other. Well, no, they're both pretty good smilers. Hi, Greg. Hi, Cory.
Aloha.
How are you guys?
Fantastic.
Good.
Yeah. You glad to be here at 9:30 in the morning on a Saturday?
I was hoping it would be a little earlier, but
Yeah.
I think the time frame suits my needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking about this for a long time. I mean, Greg, when was the last? I have a whole bunch of notes that I'm going to work off of, and I think we did that like in 2021.
Don't remember.
Something like, yeah, I know, it was so long ago.
Drinking 24/7 since.
Good to hear. Good to hear. All right, so everybody out there that don't know Greg Allen, that was he that was speaking. He is the leader of this force called Greg Allen's Fringe Religion. And Cory, you're the guitar player for the band.
It's true.
Yeah, I'm going to try not to lie today. Liars are not good.
I mean, I don't mind. You can say whatever you want about me.
Oh, don't give me an
Just
opening.
make it good.
He's
All right.
insignificant. It's all about me. I mean, you can ask other band members prior to and it's all about Greg.
Well, listen, I'm going to prove that in just a second because, believe it or not, Greg, there are some people that don't know of you and the band.
Impossible.
It's hard to believe.
Impossible.
But, Cory, just before
a household name, damn.
Yes.
Darn
yes.
it. Darn it.
Yeah, in the big house, I think. See what I did?
Perhaps.
That was a joke there.
I got it.
He's very popular in
You're
prison.
madcap.
Yeah,
You're madcap
I'm
and zany.
Yeah. Wow, going back to the 40s. Awesome. So,
Talking
Cory,
to-
how did you meet this character? How did you do that? When was that?
I think I found him on Craigslist or something like that.
Wait, sure, it wasn't. I was going to say a terrible joke. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, no, it was in the
Feel
missed.
free.
It was in the missed connections section on
Yeah.
Craigslist.
That makes sense.
They were looking for a guitar player to do I think it said something about the Faces and Stones kind of stuff, and I said, I can do that.
Yeah, and you're like, yeah, it's just like what I want to do.
Yeah. Exactly.
So, we're going to talk all about him, like you said. It's all about Greg. But tell me a little bit about your growing up and when you first picked up a guitar, if guitar was your first instrument, and all that good stuff. Just tell us about you.
It was my first instrument. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas area. I've only lived up here for about 4 or so years. But
Different, isn't it?
yeah. I like it up here.
Yeah.
So I actually chose to move up here from there.
Yep.
But yeah, I started playing when I was probably 11 or 12. Middle school
Yep.
age.
And was that that type of music, just kind of Stones?
At the time, it was more classic rock in general.
Yeah.
I was really into when I started playing Guns N' Roses and Queen and AC/DC.
And your first band was about what age?
First band that actually played some songs, probably 14 or 15.
Yeah. And it was a classic rock cover band, or you did originals?
No, by that time I'd gotten kind of into punk rock, so we were probably
Nice.
playing Sex Pistols songs, and I remember learning some Blondie with some friends, things like that.
So I would imagine that you didn't move up here because you joined Greg Allen's Fringe
Right,
Religion, right?
right.
You were already here, and you saw the ad.
Yep.
Yeah. And that happened about 4 years ago when you came here?
Yeah. That sounds right. Yeah.
All right, cool.
I think I moved up. I moved up here in December of 2018, something
right.
like that. Started
All right.
playing with those guys the summer right after that.
All right, well, welcome to the area. Glad to have you.
Thanks.
All right, Mr. Allen. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I lose you for a second there?
Just
No.
on the
So-
nod.
Listen, just to start this thing off, just to sort of expand on what I was saying before, that you may not be known by everybody that's listening, but we're going to change that today. I'm going to read 2 different perspectives that's been written about you. One,
Oh, boy.
one was not by you, and one was by you.
Really?
Yeah. So Brett Milano wrote a really nice thing. If you go to fringereligion.com, you'll see it. And I just want to write the following. This is from a very well-respected rock and roll writer, Brett Milano. He said, Greg Allen is a true believer who's played with a few of his heroes and probably a few of yours. He said the music is rock and roll with a nod to all the greats. The band sounds simultaneously familiar and fresh. Hints of classic arena rock, power pop, sleazy glam, proto-punk, gut bucket blues, and even some country honk serve as backdrop to Allen's unique storytelling. It's pure rock and roll, the kind they don't make anymore. And then he had a recommendation. He said, come see Greg Allen's Fringe Religion and restore your faith in rock and roll. Now, those are really nice words.
I love Brett Milano.
Yeah, he loves you too.
Yeah.
But I got to say too, just what he said was true. You for your famous sense of humor, you've got some real great music that you guys make. Now, I'm just sort of going down my Facebook page, and I have a post that you did the other day promoting your appearance here. Mm-hmm. And let's just compare and contrast, shall we?
Yeah,
This is introduce you to Greg a little bit, and listen, he loves the music. He knows that he plays a lot of great stuff, but this is how he promoted today, just to give you an idea who he is. He said, Cory and myself will be on the Mike Newman Show next Saturday, January 7th at MFO. Then he said, we will be full of bravado and will attempt to lower the bar for what's considered real rock and roll as we know it by playing several songs off the longest pre-released record in history, with the exception of some weird Guns N' Roses thing, but that just wound up being nothingness in the end, he said. Then he said, invite your family and friends to sit around your Bluetooth speaker just like the old days, and feel free to call in with your random insults and criticisms. That last thing we won't give you the phone number. But after that he said, and he meant it, we love all you even more than your family members and closest relatives, and we're not kidding. Keep the faith. So that just shows off a little bit of your thought process. You sort of look at the world in a unique way, for sure.
Kind of an opaque view.
Yeah.
But, it makes sense to me.
Makes sense to
when you're living in a self-absorbed bubble,
yeah.
You usually come out with gibberish like that. So, but, I just kind of call them like I see them, if I posted that with some other bands when I was younger or whatever, they would have been furious, like, dude, you're telling the world we're idiots. Or
no sense of humor.
No.
Yeah.
A lot of these rock guys don't have a sense of humor. It's, and I'm not trying to make a comedy show out of our performances, but on the other hand, you can't take 50-year-old men in a rock group too seriously either. Unfortunately, a lot of people take themselves seriously at my age.
Yeah.
And, they're dancing around, with fire coming out of their ears on stage and stuff. And then they're done. You're like, hey, that's pretty funny. Like, what?
Somebody call 911.
Yeah, somebody call 911. Yeah. But, it's just the way it is, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Well, I like the candor. And I like that. I like that, not looking at yourself too seriously, because I kind of have that same affliction, actually. So we talked a little bit about your influences. I'll just sort of they extend from the Stones, MC5, New York Dolls. That's a big one. Stooges, Kinks, early Aerosmith, and you grew up in Rhode Island,
right?
And I saw that your mother was really instrumental in introducing you to a lot of great music when you were a kid.
Well, my dad, both of them actually. My dad was a jazz guitar player, and my mom played the violin, and my sister played the piano. So we're a fairly musical family. My uncle was a drummer.
That's awesome, yeah.
And my mother would get me like Beatles singles and stuff, and I think she was the first one. I remember being in the living room trying to mess around with the keyboards because I thought Emerson, Lake and Palmer were cool for some reason. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. I don't know. Maybe it was from smoking catnip out in some tool shed, and I just decided that, Emerson, Lake and Palmer are actually good. And she said, "No, come check this out on TV." And on TV were the New York Dolls on this new midnight special. And then she goes, "Look at the guitar player. It looks like he's been electrocuted." And after that, I said, "This is the best band I've ever seen in my entire life."
I want to be electrocuted on TV.
I want to be electrocuted like Johnny Thunders. Yeah. And David Johansen looked like, Mick Jagger's little teen daughter, knock-kneed and screaming and yelling about stuff that didn't, Frankenstein monsters or trash or whatever. I'm like, these guys, I don't know, this somehow became Mad Magazine meets the Rolling Stones or something,
Yeah.
And that's when I lost it, and that's why I haven't had a really good job during the course of my life, because it would all, came to...
It always came full circle back to wanting to set yourself on fire from your ears on stage.
Sure, yeah, jumping around trying to impress people at age 90.
Yeah.
Still, he won't stop, will he?
No, even though you were looking at, guitar players, you didn't start playing guitar. When you were a kid, you had a neighbor that you described as an army brat that introduced you to MC5, and you mentioned Kick Out the Jams.
Right.
And taught you how to play a different instrument.
Well, this fellow lived down the street, and he was an army brat, and he was a drummer, too, and His name was Scott, but he called himself Ginger because he loved Ginger Baker.
Okay.
And I hated Cream. I wasn't a big fan of that. My girlfriend's got a beard, dun dun dun, or
What?
there's a line in one of the Cream songs, and the rainbow has a beard or something.
Okay.
None of the lyrics made any sense to
One
me.
of their more obscure tracks.
Weight Room. I don't know. I just didn't like it. Anyway, so he said, check this out. These guys are tough. And I said, what's this? And he puts on the MC5 Kick Out the Jams record. Like I said, we had just been smoking catnip out in his tool shed. And then we go into his basement there with his drums and stuff and Kick Out the Jams on 10. So now I'm completely disoriented because I'm an 11-year-old boy on smoking catnip and listening to Kick Out the Jams. I'm like, another revelation. I got to get this record. So that's when I got turned on to the MC5. It was just like a giant car accident. The guitars are out of tune and some guy's yelling about a rambling rose or whatever.
But you can't take your eyes off it.
No, you couldn't. You couldn't stop listening to it. I listened to it over and over, and everybody said, turn that garbage down. That is horrible. So I turned all my friends in the neighborhood onto the Kick Out the Jams album, and they're like, I'm like, what do you think? And they're like, I hate you, and I hate this record. So I didn't make many friends that year. I guess that was 71. I was kind of like, the guy with the dunce cap in the corner of the classroom.
Nice.
But, and of course, 20 years later, all those same people can Kick Out the Jams, a cool album, right? I'm like, hey, man, weren't you the same idiot that told me that stunk 20 years ago? Well, I never said that. These guys are. They're wearing like, whatever.
I just want to highlight something from that story. You've mentioned it twice now, and maybe, Cory, you can back me up. I must have missed something. Smoking the catnip?
I find it fascinating, too. That's why I keep going back to it, because it's like, who came up with that idea?
Well, I always wondered why you can, crouch into a position on the floor and then leap to the highest place in the room. Now I understand.
It's kind of like the key to understanding Greg's personality.
It kind of is.
And I ruined all my mother's furniture, too, by
jumping around like that, yeah.
Well,
scratching it up.
Just like, Greg just destroyed
Curtains,
our couch. He ripped it all up. He's been smoking catnip in the barn again with some hippie. So
Ginger, but not really his name.
Not really Ginger.
Yeah.
It was great watching him. I'm a little kid, and he's going up, and some girl's going, "Hey, what's your name?" And he's like, "Ginger, baby." And I'm like,
and
oh
she's
my
thinking
God.
Gilligan's Island. What's wrong with this guy?
What a bag of cheese. But,
Did he even have red hair?
He did. Had goldish red. And it was
a wig.
No, it was his real hair, and he was a good drummer, and he taught me how to play drums, and that's how I started. And
well, it wasn't a wasted effort. I mean, because you did have a couple of garage bands as a drummer, right? And
I think mostly as a guitar player. I don't know if I played in any bands as a drummer. I did later on when I was in high school. I played drums for a couple bands. But
I mean, you said it didn't last long,
right?
Because you really wanted to play guitar because you wanted to be like the Dolls.
I wanted to be like Keith Richards, like everybody did.
Yeah.
But I couldn't, and I wouldn't, and I'll never be. But I thought he was very inspirational for me because he was just he wrote great songs, and
he's a great performer.
He's a great performer, and his attitude was pre-punk. He was sort of like I remember one time they said, the guy from Jethro Tull, name Ian Anderson, said to this analytic, Ian Anderson said that the Stones don't pay their taxes, and he goes, what does that hippie acid freak know about taxes anyway? It's just the funniest stuff, would come out of his mouth. So, I don't know. Big influence.
Well, and, as you grew up, you had a lot of success. I mean, Greg, you've played all over the place. You've opened for a lot of your heroes, like Brett said.
Yeah.
Just to mention a couple, you opened in various bands, and we'll talk about a few of them. You opened for Johnny Winter, Blue Cheer, Nazareth, Johnny Thunder, Robin Lane and the Chartbusters, and Rick Derringer. Any of those, or a different one that you remember that you want to sort of tell us what that was like?
We used to play with the Neighborhoods a lot, the original Neighborhoods lineup in Providence, and they were absolutely fantastic. They were like, just as a three-piece band, We played with them. That was always a lot of fun. I remember we played with Blue Cheer, and Dickie Peterson stayed over my house one night. It was the weirdest thing in the 80s, because Blue Cheer were the biggest, a huge influence on, heavy metal. And they did Summertime Blues, and they were like the loudest band. So we got a gig with them at Lupo's Heartbreak Hotel. And at the end of the night, Dickie Peterson, the bass player, comes up and says to me, what's going on after this? And I said, I'm going home. He goes, can I stay at your house? And I go, what? He goes, I don't want to stay with these guys. I'm sick of them. So I said, okay, fine. So then here I am with Dickie Peterson from Blue Cheer driving back to this little shack that I rented in Rhode Island. Let's go to McDonald's. And he had a manager that was a Hell's Angel, and he'd go, I love my manager. Then he'd turn around and go, I hate my manager. Don't you think he's a jerk? I go, I don't even know the guy, man. So I wake up in the middle of the night. Dickie Peterson's at my house. I'm thinking, my girlfriend's like, who's this nut, this like crazy motorcycle rider in our living room, you know? I wake up to see the kitchen on fire.
Okay.
Like 3 feet of fire coming off the stove, and Dickie's throwing those little goldfish that you buy, the cracker goldfish, on the fire to try to put it out. I guess he tried to make something to eat late at night, you know.
Yeah, people get hungry,
almost burned my house down. He goes, I think that place is on fire. And I'm like, oh boy, this guy is nuts. So his band members came and took him away the next day, and that was the last I saw of him. But that was an experience.
Well, what was it like playing with these bands that you got to open for, that you knew of and you listened to? I mean,
it was great.
Good experience.
Yeah, I mean, excuse me. I loved opening shows for bands like, you know, Derringer or Nazareth were the greatest guys in the world. They took us up to Boston the next day, and they were going to give us a bunch of equipment and help us make a record. Manny was going to produce our record. At that time, I think they were on MCA Records, and he goes, they liked our band, and they wanted to work with us. And they had a manager named Bob Bonas at the time, who was actually the Rolling Stones' first manager. And they said, we're going to get you in contact with Bob. It was just great experience playing with some of these bands, because some of these bands that you kind of liked, idolized when you were a kid, were really nice, great guys. And some were more arrogant jerks, you know. But for the most part, they were musicians are pretty friendly people. And it was a great experience. We had these 2 girls, Daisha Vodolato and Hera Vodolato in Rhode Island, who helped us get these shows at the living room because they liked us. And so they were, you know, influential in getting us decent gigs back then.
Cool. So we've established that you love the Dolls, you play guitar, did a little bit of drumming, catnip too.
Yeah.
And in '74, there was another instrument that you played for a little while, bass. As a bass player, you started a band, and it was called Raggedy Ann.
Well, actually, I was the guitar player in Raggedy Ann. And
okay.
The bass player was this guy named Dwarf. And Raggedy Ann was our version of the Dolls in suburban Rhode Island in 1974.
Okay.
We were absolutely unacceptable in every situation.
And this was really your first
my first vision of an ideal rock group.
Okay.
And we were a punk rock band, and we had these ridiculous songs, and we looked even more ridiculous. And once again, we were not, put on a pedestal.
Yeah, I mean, you said that you wanted to be the Dolls in the Rhode Island suburbs, and you also added failed miserably at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the first gig we did, we had the guy named Dwarf, was a short little guy, and we take him, we made these platform shoes out of 2x4s, and we wrapped them with silver duct tape. And then we took Christmas lights and wrapped them around his shoes. So he was about 5 feet, but with the platform shoes, he was about 6 feet on the stage, but he couldn't walk because they're made out of wood.
Sure.
So we plugged him into the wall, and his shoes would flash on and off, just like a Christmas tree. And he'd just stand there and play the bass. And we had this drummer who looked like a cab driver, and a singer who was just hated everybody. And I had a stack of Marshall amps, and we played some assembly at Christmas. I remember people screaming.
High school assembly,
and just staring with their mouths like, what is this,
Right.
And like looking, just peer and see the bass player, standing there with Christmas lights attached to his 2 platforms. We didn't go over well.
Not what you expected when you woke up in the morning.
No, they did. The assembly, they didn't like us, and we broke the PA, and they hated us even more. And then I remember the singer punched one of the teachers while it was an unfortunate situation.
Well, they weren't all like that. I mean, I won't mention all the bands that you were in, but you're also one called Smoke. It was a cover band.
Oh, God,
And you said the singer was from a bowling alley. Tell us about that whole thing.
Well,
and playing at JCC, I imagine that's a Jewish community center?
That was unbelievably, again, unfortunate for my career.
Yeah.
We had a singer, we found his name was Tony Rizzo, or Razzo, and we found him in a bowling alley, and he had like a polyester shirt on and a lot of chest hair and a really awful complexion. And we said, we got to get this guy as a singer. And he's like, I'd like a Lou Graham. He's a singer. And I'm like, okay, this is the guy we need. So I remember we played and Jewish Community Center, he's doing like Whole Lotta Love.
Yeah, Zeppelin covers.
Yeah, we're doing like Zeppelin, and I'm singing with him, and he's doing Whole Lotta Love, and Stairway to Heaven, and then he turned around to me in the middle of the gig and said, your breath smells horrible, through the PA and everything. I'm like, thanks, man, cool.
What kind of an accent is that, actually?
I don't know. It's supposed to be Italian, but I don't know what it was. I don't know where he came from. I don't know why he was in the band, and I don't know anything about it. Sounded like a bad dream that you kind of relive over and over again, but again, like a car accident, you can't stop seeing it, Anyway, that band kind of dissipated. Our drummer, I think I remember one time he set up his drum kit on 2 like lunchroom tables and started doing a solo, but the table started splitting apart. So there's like half his drums are going towards the kitchen and half the drums, and one of his foot on the hi-hat is going towards like the bathrooms, and he's actually splitting in half. It was just preposterous. But you live and you learn,
Yeah. So just to sort of I won't go into the details of, but you've been around. You went to New York. You were in London for a little while, and I think while you were in London, Vulture Squad was a band. Something about being deported.
Well, yeah, the Vulture Squad. When we put that, I had lived in New York for a while, and I met this girl from London, lovely girl, and. Her dad was good friends with Wilco from Dr. Feelgood, and he had written a couple songs on the first Dr. Feelgood record. And she was we had a lot in common with music and stuff. She was a bit younger, and she said, when she went back to England, she said, "Why don't you come back here? And you might I can introduce you to some of my friends who are musicians, and you might like London and stuff." So I got there, and actually I wound up living in Brighton, and another friend of mine from New York came from New York to live with me in Brighton, and we put a band together. He had a very bad drug problem at the time, so he came over to kind of kick drugs, and he lived in a snorkel jacket, in a bed at the end in my bedsit for like 2 weeks and never got out of bed. But then he got out of bed like 2 weeks later, and he's been drug free ever since. It was the weirdest thing. But he played, he's an American guy. Then we had another guy named Tris Burns, and we had a bunch of different drummers because none of them really worked out. And we actually played in Brighton mostly. And we did come back to New York to play CBGB's with the drummer from Cameo playing, which is the weirdest thing. And we did a few shows, then we had some bad luck with fatalities. Like, that thing happened to the our bass player's girlfriend, and a few people died, so the band split up, and I stayed in the States, and they went back to England, and that's what happened there. But potentially it could have been a good band. We did a little recording in London. I don't know whatever happened to it. And we had a lot of fun playing in Brighton and some of those cool clubs. It was a great time, really, while it lasted.
And where was it was a band called Jigsaw Man.
Right.
Johnny Rayo. When did that happen?
I don't know if Johnny Rayo was in the Jigsaw Man. He may have
a bad note taker.
No, it just gets a little bit convoluted.
Yeah.
The Jigsaw Man I put together with Pete McClanahan, who was in Warrior Soul at the time. And David Turetsky, who actually played in Sylvain's band, and he replaced Jerry in Sylvain's band. An excellent, he was in the Devil Dogs, and great drummer. So it was a 3-piece band, and we started playing around in New York, and that kind of evolved into the Greg Allen Group because it wasn't actually, contrary to what people might think, an ego thing to name it Greg Allen Group. It was just I'd been writing songs and in so many different bands with all my material. We might as well just said, why change it? Name it the Chuckle Bunnies, we're sick of that name. It's Greg Allen Group, and we did. That's when Johnny Rayo joined. He did a bunch of shows, and he was from David Johansen's group, and he played with Sylvain, and he played with bunch of people, great guitar player, played with Mike Monroe, and so he helped me do an album called Just For You, and he actually helped with a lot of those songs. Great guitars. He's on the new album too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Very nice. All right, we'll have to circle back to that. So I know we've been jumping around in time, like we're in a time machine here, but let's talk about a band that was called Blue Ruin. It was back in the early 80s.
Yep.
And that's when you were back in around Providence area.
Correct. That's when we started doing decent shows. You know.
And when you were putting it together, you were... Tell me about how you're looking for the right people in the band because of your experiences.
I wanted to get the guys that looked good. I could care less if they knew how to play. No, not really. I mean, in Rhode Island, it was kind of slim pickings for your rock and roll star types.
Like, I mean, you liked the way the Dolls looked.
Yeah, I like the way the Rolling Stones looked.
Yeah.
I like the way the MC5 looked.
Right.
I mean, a lot of it was intertwined with fashion, contrary to, again, a lot of people think, the Stones, had a pre-designed thing, and Anita Pallenberg made them look. I think she had a big influence on what clothes they'd wear, and because you look at the whole thing, it's rock, it's entertainment. It's not like a rock band shows up with their cargo shorts on, and okay, that's fine, and I'm sure they're fine musicians, but I don't want to see that. I want to see.
You want the whole thing to exude rock and roll.
I want to see the Cramps, man.
Oh yeah. So you would. My point is, you had a lot of experiences, some not so good, but you
Right.
sort of understood what you wanted in a band, forming a band at that point. So Blue Ruin became that band. Now, but it wasn't perfect, because I had asked you whenever we talked about a memory of one of the first gigs with that band.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the greatest experience.
No.
And first of all, Blue Ruin, I guess, is slang for drunk white boys in the ghetto neighborhood.
Yeah,
Is it?
Yeah, I think that's where it came from. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you had a big show with this band. You got the band together. You had a big show already. And you can embellish the story, but you were drunk.
Well, I don't think I'll take the fifth.
Well, you
On
said you couldn't find the singer.
Well, here's what happened.
Okay.
We had this singer named Freddie. He was absolutely. We found this guy. Girls loved him. He was the greatest looking guy, and he could sing. And we're like, we're going to be huge because this guy can sing. Girls love him. Unfortunately, he had disappeared a couple days before our first show, which is at Rhode Island College. And he took off with some cop's wife and locked himself in a brewery in Cranston, Rhode Island.
Oh, really?
And I believe he was tripping on acid, too. So when we went to get him for the show, we went to his house, and the curtain slid open just a bit, and I like, hey man, we got the show tonight, and he didn't recognize anybody in the band.
Oh, that's bad.
Bad when you have your first gig. Bad when the singer doesn't recognize the band members, and you're going to be playing in about 4 hours, and you told everybody how great you're going to be at your first gig at the college. So that was a problem. So we get him there, and he doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know who the drummer is, and I'm thinking this is going to be rough, when he has to remember the songs.
Yeah.
So he just stayed at the bar downstairs. About an hour later, me and the bass player said, we got to get out of here. I'm panicking, And we took off to McDonald's or something. But when we came back at 4 p.m, the crew at the college rolled in a big, barrel full of beer, and the whole band had drank it. Our sound guy drank all the beer. Everybody was so drunk they didn't know where they were. We didn't know. I'm like, this is before the sound check. So I'm thinking this is going to be a disaster, which it turned out to be. It's
horrible.
Yeah, it gets worse. So, we get on, we play. Freddie's singing Chuckle Bunny Baby. You're just making up stuff. I saw a car go by. Making up lyrics that don't make any sense.
Yeah.
So I could have pushed him away. I said, he didn't know who I was anyway. So we sent him home. And that's how I became a singer, because I just remembered my own songs and I sang.
Nice.
At that point, however, everybody on the crew and the band was so drunk, except for me and the bass player, for the first time, I guess, that the audience had kind of moved back like one big crowd, like an explosion had occurred, and they move away
Kinda
from
did.
the explosion, And then I remember hearing through the monitors, okay, Eddie. I'm like, there's no Eddie in the group, And I look up, and there's the sound guy, and he's just drunk out of his mind, and the follow spot goes right on the ceiling and explodes into this huge, big cylinder of light, and becomes like the size of a dime on my head, and.
So there was a problem with the guitar player, too?
Yeah, at the end of he's babbling to me, and I hit him and knocked him down a flight of stairs. And the guy who promoted the show, they're holding him back as friends because he wants to kill us.
Yeah,
because we're horrible.
And he told you guys will never play here
never
or
play
anywhere
here
again.
You will never play in this country again. And I'm like, whatever. It's just a bad day, man.
Well, you chalk that up to the first gig,
and that was our first gig. And after that, we got good shows.
It did.
It was weird.
I mean,
that worked
Blue
out.
Ruin. After that, believe it or not, you went out to share the stage with a bunch of greats. Johnny Winter again, Rick Derringer, John Butcher Axis from around here, Nazareth, Johnny Thunders, the Hoods that you mentioned, Del Fuegos and Blue Cheer. So Blue Cheer really was did turn out all right after that horrible start.
Well, I guess they had probably done a lot of drugs, prior to that. Those 80s shows, and had a little bit of possible brain damage, but they were good. And Dickie actually was a nice guy,
Yeah, and Billy Rath.
Oh, Billy produced our first single.
That's right. He recorded and produced a single for you guys. So that's pretty good.
He did. That's the funniest thing I remember. We were recording a single. We did it in Revere, Massachusetts at Euphoria Sound, which is a great studio, and Billy agreed to do it for us. And And I remember,
I still have that same damn cold.
I do too. It's really super annoying.
Terrible.
And so I remember going into the booth and seeing Billy like looking through the glass into the recording booth, and I look at Billy and he's just staring straight. And I go, "What's up, man?" And he goes, "Nothing." And I go, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "You're a drummer." And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "He looks like H.R. Puffin stuff."
A reference that only people of a certain age
Right,
will get.
like a stuffed animal. And I said, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yeah." I go, "Okay, let's just finish this recording, man. We got a lot on our plate here. We don't have to talk about why the drummer looks like a stuffed animal." And he didn't say it like it's funny. Isn't that funny? He's like, "He does look like H.R. Puffin stuff."
Meant it.
Yeah, that meant it. So that came out the way you expected it to come out. And that record was a lot of fun.
Well, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, so we've been talking for about a half hour with Greg and Cory from Greg Allen's Fringe Religion. I want to tell you it's 10 a.m. at WMFO Medford. I want to jump ahead, Greg, from when you actually finished Blue Cheer. And lasted about 2 or 3 years, right? And you moved to New York at that point. You're about 24 years old. And you moved there, and we mentioned London for a little while. You were back in New York. In New York, you loved it. You loved all the great bands there. And you worked at Tower Records, which makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
And you mentioned that your girlfriend at the time was in a band called Bee Gees. Not Bee Gees, Bee Girls band.
She had joined Cynthia Ross's band briefly, called the Bee Girls, but she was in a band here in Massachusetts called Fuzzy. They did a few records on Atlantic Records. They're pretty popular, but at that time, I think she had ditched me, and I'd moved to New York, and but we'd still live together in this weird welfare hotel for the first year.
Yeah. Now that's the kind of things you'll do because you want to be near the bands.
Yeah,
you moved into this welfare hotel, and then I guess you ended up in a porno studio at some point as well. Things were just going nowhere fast.
No, not really. I mean, but the thing when you're young, you don't really think about how horrible, living with giant cockroaches at the end of the bed or living in a porno studio. You just think of it as an adventure, and it was a lot of fun. You don't really think like, I should be getting an education and own a BMW or something. At that point, it was just like, no, I want to, I love the city. It smells like garbage, and everybody's, either a musician or an artist, and it just was so cool. The vibe was so cool. You didn't really care how you lived, whether you lived in a cardboard box or in a,
Yeah, I understand. You just want to be in the scene and in that whole thing.
Yeah.
And the whole New York Dolls thing, came up again when Jerry Nolan sort of came into your life.
Right.
He was the ex-drummer of the New York Dolls, and you had seen him in a band, a short-lived one that he was in called the Ugly Americans, that you guys opened for a few times, and he liked your band.
Well, yeah, we played with Jerry and Sil and the Ugly Americans when I thought they were great. We'd go down and see them every Friday night at the Continental.
That's fantastic.
And they were just great. And then finally we said, I think our drummer Simon said, Simon, who was from Boston actually, he was in the Two Saints and the Daughters and a bunch of other groups. He said, maybe we should get a gig, and somehow, I don't know if he got it, I got it, we got in there, and we did a couple shows with him. And
was that with the Profilers?
No, the Profilers were later on. That was Jerry, myself, and Chicago Vinny.
Okay.
So we did a couple shows, and then I saw Jerry in front of my apartment, and he had quit Sil's band. And he said, "Oh, I like your band, man," And I said, "Oh, cool." And he said, "Where are you playing next?" And I said, "We're playing at the Hell's Angels bar down at the end of the street." And he said, "Oh, when?" And I said, "Tonight." And he said, "Oh, I'll come down and check it out," And I said, "Sure." So sure enough, him and Buddy Bowser showed up. Buddy Bowser played on the first Dolls album, great sax player, but nice. Jerry's best friend. And it was an interesting night there. And he's like, "I really like this group. It's a horrible name." I think the name of the band was the Whores of Venice. That's what we called our band.
Nice.
And yeah, it was pleasant. And then he said, I said, maybe we should put something together at one point. He said, absolutely, let's, do something. So we started hanging out together, and I'd play drums, and he'd play guitar, and we figured, let's put a band together. And so we did eventually, Now,
yeah. when did the Profilers happen? Because I know you guys recorded a couple of 5 or 6 songs with...
Well, we're going to do an album. Jerry had agreed... Actually, I was going to do have a different drummer play, and I was living with Jerry at the time on First Street and First Avenue, and I was on the phone with this drummer in Boston, and I had got a little money together to record, and I had asked him if he wanted to play, and I put the phone down. Jerry looks at me and goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm just calling this guy in Boston, this drummer I know, and who might want to record with me." And he goes, "Why didn't you ask me?" And I said, "Well, I don't know. I just
didn't think you'd be interested.
No, that's exactly what I said. I said, I didn't think you'd be interested, And he goes, no, I love these songs. Get rid of that guy. So I said, man, we're not going to do that, So Jerry and I put something together. And then we got Chicago Vinny from Rhode Island. And, it was a very big guy, Vinny. He passed away a few years ago. And the first time I brought him down, and Vinny's very imposing looking and looked like he just got out of jail and will go back again. And and he told... And Jerry looks at him like, who is this guy? He goes, you bring me this? And I go, yeah. And he goes, look at the way he looks like a criminal. And I said, well, better, And then Vinny started telling Jerry all the guys he played with, like Lazy Lester and all these blues guys he's toured with. And Jerry was a complete blues fanatic, And so he's like, this guy would be perfect in the band. So that's how we got Vin. And we started recording. And we got even more money to finish a record, but then Jerry got sick halfway through the recording and died.
Passed away.
Yes.
And you had those recordings, and I guess you kept them in your apartment in a coffin.
Yes. I had a coffin in my living room.
As people do, yeah.
Most New Yorkers, prerequisite coffin
I'm not sure
in living room.
Never know we're going to need one.
Yeah, it's
right.
That's a good point.
Be
actually.
prepared.
And around that time, it would have been very useful, but, So, yeah, had the 2-inch... reels of tape in there for several years, and then Night Bob. I mentioned it to Night Bob, who worked for Aerosmith for years, and all these people, great guerrilla producer, sound man, etc. I said, let me mix some of these, and he made some rough mixes, and he said, you can't. These tapes are so old, they're oxidized, and they're going to come right off the reel. So the only way to make them happen is to bake them in this oven, confection oven.
Uh-oh. Is this another fire story?
No, they
Good.
baked the tapes, and so we managed to salvage 5 or 6 songs out of the 10 that we did, and we put that out
in a documentary kind of
right.
It's in memory of
right,
Jerry.
And not like this is stellar performances. No, that wasn't.
Is it
there.
available somewhere?
It's available on Bomp Records on vinyl, on pink vinyl, 12-inch, and it's available through them, and it's available digitally at Kudos in London, Kudos Limited, which is the distribution that I work with in England, so you can get it digitally. Or I think there's a few copies left. There are only 200 pressed of the pink vinyl, and I think there's very few left at Bomp. But
it is on Spotify too.
It is.
Okay.
Oh,
if you
all
can't get your hands on a physical copy.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, it's a great thing that you got to sort of wrap that up and put that out in his memory. Like
Yeah.
That was very good. All right. So let's come full circle here to Greg Allen's Fringe Religion, which is why we're here. You guys formed in like 2013, correct?
The original band? I don't remember. I don't remember what year it was. It was a completely different lineup.
It's from when you moved to Boston from New York.
When I first moved I had moved to Rhode Island and then back here. I'd stayed in Rhode Island for a couple of years.
Had some lousy jobs.
I went to school in Rhode Island in early 2000 to get my paralegal degree.
Criminal justice
stuff because I had been arrested and.
Well, that'll come in handy when when you need to speak on your own behalf.
I may be, going back that way again. I don't know.
No.
I don't know. But yeah, so I went to school there, came back to Boston. The first band I joined was a band called Port Charles Quintet as a guitar player with Greg Steinbaugh and Cam Ackland. And did covers of like Paul Revere and the Raiders stuff and
I know
Kinks.
Cam. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then I put together Fringe Religion. So I'd say that band Fringe Religion was together 10 years at least.
Yep. So you've got a new record coming out finally that we started talking about, and you started talking about before the pandemic, I think. And
yeah. Well, Cory here is engineering everything. We're recording it all in my house in the basement.
And that's what we're going to hear today.
Yeah, Cory's recorded everything and engineered everything. And so we started it, and then during the pandemic, we took a bit of a break. And maybe you can explain more about the process.
Yeah, when everything shut down, we didn't practice. We even rehearsed for a little while, but then I think we all got bored and started rehearsing again. And
you were together in the basement? Mask up?
With masks on and everything. And we were like, well, there's not any gigs right now, so maybe we're just doing this for fun. And I think Greg suggested, well, why don't we record? We've got a handful of new things that we've been working on. Why don't we just start recording them? And he asked me, have you ever done that before? And I was like, a little bit at home, just by myself. He's like, oh, you can probably record an album or whatever. So So yeah,
He's done a great job. I A and B it with all my favorite records, and just for sonically and all that stuff, and it's right up there. And
It sounds amazing, based that it's a do-it-yourself recording in your basement.
we got some great players on it too.
Yeah, talk about the rest of the band before we spin a couple of these songs.
Well, the rest of the band is we have Greg Steinbaugh on bass, great bass player. I played with in the Two Saints, and he was in Port Charles Quintet and various Boston bands. Excellent player. And Jeff Larson, great drummer. He's from my neighborhood. He played in cover bands mostly. I think he was in a couple original bands, but a real excellent drummer, hard hitter, great meter, and the extra guys we have Morgan Fisher from Mott the Hoople playing on the record.
Nice.
We have Tommy Price, who was Joan Jett's drummer for 35 years. He played with Billy Idol, all that stuff like Rebel Yell, and he was in Scandal, and he was in Mink DeVille, and did some stuff with Blondie. He played with Ron Wood. He's one of the best drummers, just fantastic. I saw him a few years ago playing with Chris Spedding and Robert Gordon. And his style was so completely polar opposite the Joan Jett drumming style. I mean, he can just play anything. So he's playing on that.
So these guys recorded their parts, and sent them to you. They
flew them in, yeah.
Right. Neat.
And Johnny Rayo is on it from David Johansen's band. And Thomas Trask is going to be on it. He was in David's band. And who else? We're missing anybody?
Just a couple of friends I've played with in the past bands. Some saxophone on one track from a friend of mine I used to play with back in Texas in like a 40s and 50s rhythm and blues type band. I think that's
all right. Well, I'm really excited for people to hear what's come out of your basement, so to speak.
Sure.
These are great. We've got 6 songs we want to play today. I want to play 2, then we'll talk about them a bit more. But let's talk about these 2 songs, and if there's anybody of note that's on these songs, let me know. We want to start with Glass Legs. Where'd that title come from?
That title came from my mother when I was a little kid. I keep going back to my mommy. But when I was a kid, I'd go like, can I get that? Can you hand me that or something? Or like, that's a silverware dish. And she'd go, get it yourself. What do you have, glass legs? So I always thought that was kind of funny. So the character, you sewed me up nicely. Your coffin fit like a glove and all your mislaid plans affected and unsung. Is this dark kind of person who's just kind of evil. And the title came because it's not relevant to the song. The song, has a story of its own, but I just thought it would be an interesting title.
Yeah, you can just pull that phrase into,
because anything can happen if you have glass legs.
Anything
they
could.
Get turned,
and none of it's good.
Step in the wrong direction and you're done.
Bad. All right.
And this is the track with Morgan Fisher from Mott the Hoople and later playing all the keyboards on it.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, and the other one we'll do is I Need a Cigarette.
Mm-hmm.
And that title, that lyrically, what's it about? How'd that come about?
That's anxiety-driven, I guess.
It's pretty straightforward. It's about what it's about,
You
right?
need a cigarette. Every time I think of you, every time I get anxious, I think I need I don't smoke anymore and I quit. And then sometimes I guess it's one of those things like, this is driving me nuts. I wish I had a cigarette.
Yeah,
That's
but
it.
you can't do it.
No, you can't.
You can't do it.
No.
All right, so at 10:14 in the morning, let's spin these 2 songs. And we're back after. Nobody's heard these, right?
I don't believe many people have, no.
Certainly not on the radio.
No.
All right, starting with Glass Legs, we'll segue in I Need a Cigarette, and then we'll be back after that. This is WMFO. It's WMFO, Medford, 10:21 in the morning. I'm Mike, here with Greg and Cory from Greg Allen's Fringe Religion, from whom we just heard. We had 2 songs that are going to be on the latest record. First was Glass Legs that we heard about. Thanks, Mom. And I Need a Cigarette. The anxiety song for the ages. Anything else you guys want to add about those 2? I will say that I appreciate everybody listening out there and commenting on the Facebook thread. I guess you're liking what you're hearing. It's good stuff. It's really good stuff, you guys. You should be proud of it.
I like it. I like the record. I don't normally like much stuff that I've done after I've recorded it. But I like this record. I think it's really good. I'd buy it. But
I mean, it's really. We've talked about all this stuff for the better part of an hour, and that really is demonstrable of what we talked about. All that stuff is really what you would want to hear from you after knowing sort of where you came from. Yeah, it's good.
None of this was preconceived. Some of the songs are older than others. Some were written, just recently, and some are 10 years old.
Yeah, yeah. I hear that a lot from songwriters. Sort of songs percolate for a long time, and when it's finally quote unquote done, still it's not done, but you've got to get it out. So
yeah, or you got other people that kind of don't like it, or they don't see what you see in it as an eventual recording, or various reasons,
Yeah, I mean, as I've said many times, music is one of those things. It's so subjective.
Right.
It just is. I mean, you never know. The thing that really gets you doesn't get somebody else. All right, so let's talk about two more songs and play them. We have one called "Cast You Away" and another one called "Just Like That." We'll play them in that order. Talk a little bit. Either one of you guys can comment on "Cast You Away."
Cast You Away.
Pointing at each other.
You wrote it.
I've been listening to Jackie DeShannon or something, and I don't know. And I came up with this. Again, it's, heartbreak, going to cast you away, the way you reeled me in, and
I see.
And had that kind of groove. Jackie DeShannon meets the Who, early Who, kind of. Don't know what else it sounds like. What do you think, Cory? I don't know. I really can't.
Yeah, I agree. It has kind of that the Searchers that did that same song that Jackie DeShannon had a hit with. Every time that you walk in the room.
Right.
I can't remember what it's called.
I love that song, yeah.
Okay. So that's Cast You Away. The next one will be Just Like That.
Well, it speaks for itself. It's just, something's going to get you, and it's not going to give you any warning. And,
This is going to be a good sampling of, like, different sounds. Like, none of these songs that you're playing sound like the others, but Just Like That is kind of, has a real, like, kind of heavier middle part. It's a lot shorter.
It's like
it's
a ton of
less
bricks.
Than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That one's less than 2 minutes, yeah.
It gets to the point, gets in and it's one of my favorite ones on this album.
All right.
I think Cory did a great job capturing it.
All right. So let's do this. We'll hear Cast You Away and then Just Like That, and then we'll come back and talk. This is WMFO, Medford. Nice. It's WMFO, 10:29 in the morning. Mike with Greg and Cory from Fringe Religion, and we just heard two more songs that are going to be out on this EP. Do you have a time when you think this will be released?
Well, actually, it'll be a full-length record. I think we've got about 12 songs. I don't know, Cory would probably... What do you think?
We've got about 15 tracks that are...
See? He knows I don't.
Okay.
In various stages. Most of them are almost done. There's really only like one.
So you looking for March or April? Because people are going to want to hear this.
Summer, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Fall.
Yeah.
Summer, fall, huh?
It's a lot going on.
It's
We've
expensive.
been shopping the record.
That was just me being disappointed. Not. I mean, are you okay? I mean, beyond today, are you okay with radio play before it comes out, or are you going to want us to wait?
Sure.
Yeah, of course.
All right, but you got to mix them a little bit more and get them ready before we spread this out.
A little tweaking, but
all right, cool. It sounds really good, guys. So that was "Cast You Away," followed by "Just Like That." Great stuff. Both of them. Anything additional that came to mind while we were playing them, or?
Just realized how pleasant Just Like That sounds. Just doesn't sound good.
Yeah.
It's a pleasant little ditty.
Yeah. All right, so we want to play two more that'll round out the new songs that you guys have. We have Two Worlds Collide, and we have One of the Boys. Let's talk a little bit about the first one, Two Worlds Collide.
This is the one that Johnny Rayo has played on so far.
Awesome.
And he's the lead guitar that's kind of the surfy, kind of reverby sounding one. And then there's my parts are kind of like back and forth, which is really cool to do. It would have been fun to do it in person, but did it virtually.
Yeah, maybe you'll have a gig one of these days where you can do that.
I'm sure.
Yep, on stage. And I'm making up my own accent. One of the Boys.
Just the song that I loved, and it was a little difficult to persuade the other two guys to do it, I think, at first, but I think they came, got on the page with it. Just a great song by Martha Hupel. I think we did a pretty good version of it.
Yeah, goes over well live, too.
Yeah. Cory's guitar playing is great. Everybody's playing on this, and particularly, I just think it's good and sloppy and rock and roll, and it just screams rock and roll, and that's why I like it. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so let's spin these two. We have Two Worlds Collide, followed by the cover. You don't do too many covers, huh? Is this the only one on the record so far?
So far.
Okay, Two Worlds Collide, then One of the Boys. This is Greg Allen's Fringe Religion on WMFO. It's WMFO in Medford, about living in the past, 10:40 in the morning. I'm here with Greg and Cory from Greg Allen's Fringe Religion, and that was the fifth and sixth songs that we heard, Two Worlds Collide, and One of the Boys from what is going to be a full-length record coming out sometime in 2023, hopefully sooner rather than later. We heard six songs that included Glass Legs, I Need a Cigarette, Cast You Away, Just Like That, and then Two Worlds Collide, and One of the Boys. And I got to tell you guys, sounds really good. Like I said, should be proud of it. Getting very good feedback on the Facebook thread. So yeah, mission accomplished. I mean, deserves to be heard. Really does.
Thank you.
It's really good stuff. And you guys are playing out next week.
We are. A week from today.
Yeah, tell
Saturday,
us about that.
January 14th at the Midway. And it's an afternoon show.
3 o'clock show, right?
Yeah, 3 o'clock show. We're playing with Hammered Saint, Stop Calling Me Frank, and Hilken Mancini.
Okay.
So, Hammered Saint in particular are going to be debuting some new material and a new guitar player.
And do you know the set times when you guys go on?
I think the first set starts at 3:30, and it'll be Hammered Saint, Stop Calling Me Frank, then us, and then Hilken. And
so you're probably about 4:30,
yeah,
5-ish?
That sounds right, yeah.
All right.
Probably going to be kind of short sets.
All right. Well, I want to try to go there. I hope folks that are in the area will go. Next week, Saturday, at the Midway Cafe, 3 o'clock start. Great venue, great place to go. And as you heard, you're going to hear great stuff from Greg Allen's Fringe Religion. All right. At 10:42, let me just end with a couple more stories from you, Greg, since we've got, Keith Richards to talk about. You've had some experiences with him. More than you probably ever expected. Tell us a couple.
Well, a couple.
All right, your choice.
There's one story that I keep telling that everybody who's heard it before kind of just roll their eyes and walk away. But his son Marlon called me when I was living in New York about working for this magazine and called Cheap Date, which at one point Keith bankrolled. It was a kind of fashion rock and roll magazine that my girlfriend at the time actually ran it. Anyway, he said, I heard you write and stuff. And I'm like, who is this? It's like Marlon Richards. I'm like, it's Keith Richards' son? He's like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. I said, well, I'm not really a writer. I'm just, a musician. He said, well, somebody told me you could write. Maybe you might be interested in writing for this magazine, which I did a little bit of, did the horoscopes or whatever. And anyway, so he kept saying, you got to meet my dad. Well, you never referred to him as dad. It's Keith. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I'd like to hang out with Keith, But I lived in Queens, Long Island City, and then I worked in Manhattan. And so it was always a drag when I got out of work to have to get on the train and come back at 4 a.m. because that's when those guys would show up. So say you called me a couple times. Keith's down here hanging out, drinking, drinks and stuff to pop around. I'm like, it's 2 a.m. I don't want to get on the, So then one day I was working as a bar back at the time, and I was down in the basement. And so my boss said, don't let anybody down in the basement ever. Don't let anybody down there. If anybody comes down there, you have my permission to punch him or push him or get him out, because that's where all the money is, and this is where we keep everything. So I had a key, and a couple other people had keys to the basement. 2 a.m, I'm down there smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer, just relaxing. The place is packed upstairs, and I'm by myself in the basement, which, it's filthy, rat-infested basement, but it was some place where I could take a break and just, chill out. So at the very end, probably about 40 feet away, there's the door, which I had locked and I had a key for, and I see the door open. I'm like, who could be down here at 2:30? So I'm just looking at the wall and thinking, okay, when they come up to me, I'm just going to, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to react, but it's somebody, either they want the money or something wrong, because I don't recognize this figure coming at me. So I feel this tap on my shoulder, and I turn around. It's Keith Richards, and he takes his face and he puts it directly in front of mine. He goes, who are you and blank are you doing here? I can't swear on the radio, apparently. Can't. And I just said, what? And he's got his face pressed right against mine. And I'm thinking, how did this happen?
Yeah, I know who this is, and this can't be happening.
Right, you can't. It's a dream. He's wearing leather pants and a T-shirt. I remember everything he was wearing. He has one lazy eye, so one eye's looking right at me. The other's going in the total opposite direction. And I just said, And then she goes, and he kind of motions to me to the manager's office. He goes, come in here, sit down. And he had some stuff. I can't get into too much detail. But he's like, sit down, relax. and he by himself. They had set him up to come down, freaked me out, which worked out well.
Yeah.
And as soon as he said, "Who that, blanket you?" he turned around and walked face first into the wall.
Yeah.
That's my favorite one. Then he turns around, he looks at me, just kind of shrugs his shoulders, like, whatever,
It happens.
Yeah, it happens. And then he was totally cool, and so we hung out for a little bit. And then Marlon, his son, and a few other of his friends came down. They kind of looked at me like, I gotcha. And I was like, well, that's a trip. And then I decided to go back to work, and the next, and not hang out with him that long because I was still working. My boss came in the next day and said, "But you didn't hang out with Keith the whole night." I said, "I'm here to work." And he said, "What are you, an idiot?" He goes, I said, "Well, I figured you'd get angry that I'm not working and hanging out and partying with Keith." He goes, "No." He goes, "You're an idiot." Anyway, that was one.
Well, there's just one more thing about Keith that you mentioned to me, and I hope that I didn't take this down.
It's all about
But
Keith.
something about being punched by Keith Richards. Did I hear that wrong?
I never got. I don't remember that. No, I don't know. Maybe I only met him that one time and briefly again the day of Live Aid. That was in a whole different story, but no.
Amazing, though. I mean,
no fisticuffs with that guy.
All right. Well, listen, at 10:47 in the morning, I want to thank you guys very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Especially at this
Thanks for having
horrible
us.
hour.
Yeah.
We'll do it again when this finally comes out.
Love to, yeah.
And again, we want to talk about the gig next week at the Midway Cafe. 3 p.m. start. You guys will probably be on around 4:30-ish. And it's a great lineup. And it's going to be just the main guys. Any special guests with you guys, or is just going to...
Hopefully we can make it. We've been, our bass player was sick with COVID for a couple of weeks, and I've been sick, and it's our first real rehearsal for a few weeks since everybody got sick. So I hope we can pull it together. I think, it might be a little rough and tumble, but it's rock and roll.
Yeah, it might be a train wreck, so you should definitely come down to see that.
It could be great, or it could be horrific.
I definitely want to try to go.
Yeah.
I really do. The Midway's a great place to see a band.
Yeah.
All right. So, again, Greg Allen and Cory from Greg Allen's Fringe Religion. New record coming out sometime this year. I want to thank you guys again. And
thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for all the stories.
Sure.
All right. So it's WMFO. We've got a couple of minutes.